Welcome back to 726. We're here in the studios with Dr. Gould and George Jared, and they have teamed together in their life about a tragedy that happened to you.
Correct.
A few years ago. And I don't know the case, so this is a path of discovery for me as like maybe some of the audience members. I want you to tell your story briefly, and then we'll talk about how you guys are working together.
Well, I'll start out just by saying that my daughter was murdered in 2004. So we're talking about 14 years ago. And it has literally become a cold case. And a lot of people in the area are familiar with Rebecca's, some of the details at least. I get, in my office, I'm a dentist here in Mountain Home, so in my office I get patients that ask about it frequently.
Okay.
And over the years they've always, been hesitant because they think it's painful, but in fact, yes, it's painful, but in fact, I don't mind talking about it.
Well, you want to answer the questions, and that's probably what drives you. Is that not right?
Well, I think the best way to approach this would be that anytime you lose a daughter or a son, it's an incredible tragedy for a parent. And what you go through is something that I wouldn't wish upon anybody. But it's something that's fairly frequent, and those of us that have been through it have a unique bond. My bond with George is one that started with my daughter's murder. And he might want to briefly kind of talk about the beginning of the case. My daughter was murdered in Melbourne, Arkansas. She was 22 years of age, and she was home that weekend. She was visiting her current boyfriend, and she was getting ready to permanently move to the Northwest Arkansas area to start college. And
the anniversary of them finding her is actually tomorrow.
Yes. So 14 years ago in September.
Okay.
She went missing September the 20th, which was a Monday. And then it took us roughly a week, wasn't it?
It was a week, exactly a week.
George and I met through search and rescue. So when there were some details that obviously made us aware that something tragic had happened.
Right.
My hope as a father was that there was still, an opportunity to find her and she would be okay.
Right.
I was blessed, truly blessed, in that the staff I had at my office at that time, we shut the office down. We all just went down to Melbourne, and everybody just pitched in hunting and hunting for her and trying to locate her.
George, you're a journalist, is that correct?
I'm a journalist, yes.
And you were down there volunteering, or were you
no,
down there to cover the story?
I was down there to cover it. It was the first murder case I had ever covered. And what happened was, I had a routine. I would call the sheriff's department, police departments, and so I called. It was a day or two after she had went missing, and they hadn't mentioned to me that she had went missing that Monday. This was about on a Wednesday, I believe, and so it was in Izard County. So I went down there. And when I got to the sheriff's department, you were there, a couple of your older daughters were there, Shirley, Rebecca's mother, was there, and she actually handed me this missing poster and said, "Hey, have you seen my daughter?" Okay. And on the back of it, I just started jotting down notes, and it's funny to me 14 years later how, you can see, there's the boyfriend, Casey McCullough, his name is right on there, and this was within the first few minutes of being down there. The reason that Dr. Gould and I reconnected was I wrote a book about the West Memphis 3 case in 2016. I've covered a lot of high-profile murder cases, and I interviewed all those guys when they were still on death row. And so, but the foreword in the book was dedicated to Rebecca because on the 27th, which is tomorrow, and I'm getting goosebumps underneath my shirt right now, I was actually out there when they found her body, and so I saw her. And I came back to the sheriff's department, and and Larry was there. And so when I would go to a book signing, I would always say, "I know you're here to buy this book about the West Memphis 3 case," because that's what, it's a high-profile case. But I would always tell the story about Rebecca, seeing her, and then going back to the sheriff's department and seeing her father. Well, I was at a book signing one day, and this guy walks in, and he looked kind of familiar to me. And I pitch him the book. And then at the end, I go into the part about Rebecca. And he looks at me and he says, I said, do you want to buy a book? And he goes, no, I want to buy 10 of them. And there was a photographer there taking pictures for a local magazine. And so I looked at her and I was like, whatever I just said to this guy, I need to say to everybody. And so he, I told him the part of the story that I told this guy, when I got back to the sheriff's department, there was a rumor going around that they'd found a body, obviously. I got out of my truck, I walk over, and Larry had walked up to me and he said, did they find my daughter? And I said, Larry, you need to ask the sheriff. And then he asked again, and I just said, yes, there's no other missing person in this county. And he just started crying. Mm-hmm. And so, back to the book signing, so this guy, I stacked the 10 books up, I flipped the first cover over, and I say, who do I need to make this out to? And he reaches in his pocket and he pulls out a little ribbon with her face on it and puts it on there. And as soon as he did, I knew it was him. I hadn't seen him since that day. And so he and I, this was in April of 2016, so he and I reconnected after that.
Oh, okay.
And what we've done over the last couple of years is we've really tried to push this story in the media. I've written stories about it. I've written 2 books, and in both books I've included a chapter about her case. We know it's solvable. You know, and just kind of give you some of the bones of what happened. Okay. Rebecca that morning, she took her boyfriend, Casey McCullough, to work at a Sonic restaurant there in Melbourne. She stopped off at a convenience store, bought some things, and then she headed back to his house to head, because later on that afternoon she was going to pick Danielle, her other sister, up, and they were going to go to Northwest Arkansas. Well, she obviously never showed up to pick up her sister. So eventually they started an investigation, and in the house they found a lot of blood. They found blood on a mattress, they found blood in lots of different places. So they knew that she had been severely injured at some point in the house. So a week later, a week goes by, they're out searching. I took a picture of Dr. Gould at one point literally pinning one of these onto a guide arrow going around a curve, which no one could have known. You couldn't see it. I mean, but just watching him, it really, you finally kind of understand what ghosts, like, don't understand, but you can appreciate what a parent is going through.
Every bit of hope.
Yeah.
That's what you were. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
And and I forgot to mention this, they found a bunch of bloody sheets in the washer. There was a haphazard attempt to clean the house up. And so, anyway, fast forward, so the day they find her body, she was found on the side of the road. She was found on Highway 9, which connects Melbourne to Mountain View. She was found right off the highway. I mean, if anybody had any inclination to look, they would have seen her there. Right. And she was partially clothed. You know, Dr. Gould and I have spoken about this before. It was almost as if she was asleep in the bed and somebody attacked her. To our knowledge, according to autopsy reports, she wasn't sexually assaulted that we know of. It's inconclusive, I guess, at best. But right now, that's the official line, is that she wasn't. And so over the last 14 years, we have been just chasing down leads, rumors, and we really think this case can be solved. But, you know, the state police, you know, the only person who's ever been named as a suspect in the case is the boyfriend who was at work. Right. And, you know, I've talked to him, I interviewed him.
And there's plenty of witnesses to say that he was there, working at Sonic, or?
We don't know. Well, we don't have the investigative file, so we don't know.
We may get into that in a few minutes.
Okay. Well, I was going to say Sonic is not run by one person, so I mean, have to be corroborating.
It would have to be.
Technically, in the state of Arkansas, when it's a murder case, the file, if it's unsolved, is not it's not public record. So we can speculate as to what they know or don't know about whoever. But you know, from what we've been told, Casey's alibi, it may, you know, it's legit, but we don't know anything. And we're not accusing anybody of anything, but we don't know. I've tried to interview Casey since then, and he won't talk to me. So I mean, I don't know what the deal is.
So essentially, what happened from the start was that it took there was a week of search and rescue, and literally each day that progressed, you lose a little hope, but at the same time, you're constantly thinking that she's going to be there and she's going to be okay. The reality really still doesn't hit you even when you learn that they found her body. Maybe I'm fortunate that I didn't find her body, others did. But the adrenaline that goes through you as a parent is just unreal. You don't need sleep. You don't need to eat. I mean, it's go, go, go. Yeah, and the people that were involved with search and rescue at that time, I met a lot of them. I couldn't even tell you a name, but they came from all over to help. They just bring in resources, and the people are there. It's amazing how people come to help others. And so that's something I've always been thankful for. Yeah. Once we found Rebecca, then you're dealing with funeral arrangements and things like that.
That you hadn't planned for.
Obviously, absolutely, I hadn't planned for it. But what I want to get into is typically, no matter where you live in the United States, you certainly are relying on law enforcement. So I'm no different than anybody else. My first inclination was, all right, I knew a lot of law enforcement officers from up here. I did not know many from down there. I knew some of the state police fellas. But you just think, okay, that we found her. Now they're going to do their work, and we're going to get a resolution to this pretty quick. So that part of my mind flipped to, let me take care of my family and my other her sisters, and do whatever I need to do to comfort them. Not thinking of myself, but because I think as a dad, we typically want to always be the leader for our kids. Yeah.
Of everyone.
So law enforcement, I didn't really have much contact with in the beginning weeks and even the beginning months. I just assumed that
you were letting them do their job.
Absolutely, and I think in retrospect, that should never change. These people are trained to do this. What I didn't know was something that I'd like to share, and that is that time passed, and as time passed, I knew that there must be something here that isn't making sense. It seemed to be fairly clear. It seemed to be obvious that there would be plenty of forensics, that there would be a lot of people that would be digging into this immediately and doing interviews and such.
And Dr. Gould, one important detail that we haven't shared yet is that she almost certainly died from one single blow to her head. And it was probably from a piano leg that was in the house. And so we know the weapon, we know, and it was a loose piano leg on a piano, so the killer would have just happened to have walked into the house without a weapon, found a loose piano leg, and struck her in the head one time. And so we know we know how these dots get put together.
Yeah, I'm going to jump a little later now, but year after year would pass, and typically there would be an anniversary issue in the Baxter Bulletin. They'd publish some things about it. They'd come and interview me. In the very beginning weeks after her death, you're interviewed on television, Channel 7 and the Springfield Channel and all over, and then you move on with your life. But the anniversary issues that were done were always a form of placation. It was, we're almost there, we think we know who did it, and so I'd always get my hopes up. Like, okay, great, they're doing their job, and we must be close. And so each year that would pass, I still had the belief that these fellows are men and women of law enforcement, whether it was local law enforcement, sheriff's department, or state police. It got turned over to the state police almost within the first few weeks, if not even sooner than that. The gentleman who has been the caretaker of the file for 14 years is a state police law enforcement officer, and he has pretty much handled the entire case. After 6, 7, 8 years' time would pass, I finally decided I need to do something about this, because in my interviews with the state police, they would share things with me, And they would lead me to believe, like, we know who did it. And then there'd always be rumors. And I'm not talking about what the state police would tell me. People would send things to my office. We'd get phone calls to my office. I'd get letters at my office. I'd get things that were sent to comfort me, but I'd get information from people that literally felt like they had something that would be very important. I typically would immediately call the Arkansas State Police, and I would turn that over to them. Well, after about, I'll say 8 years, that would put it as about 2012-ish.
Yeah.
I decided to write my first letter to the prosecuting attorney. So I wrote a letter to the prosecuting attorney, and I wrote a letter to the crime lab in Little Rock. The letters were specific and I'll just say technically well written to ask for information. I wanted the autopsy report. I would like to know what the forensics are, what you have. And for the prosecutor, I want to know, what do you guys have in your case file? I'd like to know where you're at. Every year, so you know this is consecutive, every year I would get a response. I'm sorry, we cannot give you any of this information because it is an active investigation. So not being a professional in the legal field or a professional in law enforcement, I accepted that to start with because I thought, okay, it's an active investigation. Little did I know that, almost nothing was being done on the case, and that all they have to do to call it an active investigation is maybe make a phone call.
Yeah, literally, they can literally do anything, any action that's relating to the case. If they take a phone call,
then it's an active investigation.
To active.
Yeah, it'll keep it active. It's a gray area in the state's laws, and it's actually something I think needs to be changed at some point, because it's like Dr. Gould. He has spent a lot of resources investigating this case on his own, and he would be more than happy to use more, but he has to know what's in the file so he knows which way to go.
Right.
So active versus cold case?
Everybody knows the term cold case from television and stuff. Right. So a cold case is a case that, to me, what a cold case is, it's a case that the investigators have just reached a point that they can no longer determine which direction to go.
Like no active
they may still have suspects, but there's just nothing there. And I felt that's the point they had reached. And so I was wanting to intervene. I in my letters, I would even say, look, I know you guys are spread thin. You may have limited resources. You're probably overworked, and you have a caseload that's probably pretty rugged. Well, here I am. I'm willing to provide you with people that are ex-law enforcement, ex-FBI, ex-people that are trained in your profession, that know how to handle evidence. Let's let them come in and at least look at the file and be another pair of eyes. I was rejected. So one of my biggest complaints is that I don't think it's right, that I think laws need to be changed, and I would like to introduce a Rebecca law, and I've talked to people about this. It can be loosely written in a way that still protects law enforcement and protects the
integrity of the
case. Integrity of the file itself, so that if there's something that's important to a prosecuting attorney that would preclude them from being able to successfully get a conviction in a case, then obviously we don't want that out. But there are people that are retired that have nothing but time, that love to work on things like this, and that's what I was trying to do. Totally rejected. And to the point where I did year after year after year. I finally called the prosecuting attorney, and we had conversations. I felt the way I was treated was not right, that I was treated in a way that didn't really show compassion for a parent that's wanting nothing more than to help find the person that murdered, or persons that murdered my daughter. And certainly to have answers. Any parent wants to know what happened.
Yeah. You don't want objections. You just want to know. And what was their objection to that? What was the objection?
It's the same. I've covered a lot of murder cases. It's the
It's
same
an active
thing.
investigation.
Yeah.
It's just a way to hang up the phone and move on.
Yes.
It's a way for them to keep control of the file.
Yeah.
Right.
Because, and it's like any profession, and I mean, I've got lots of friends who are great detectives and great law enforcement guys. I mean, I'm not saying anything.
Right.
But I've covered enough murder cases that there is a pattern. You know, I've written 2 books. I've got a 3rd one that's about to come out. And there's a lot of unsolved murders in those. They're anthologies. And there's a lot of unsolved murders that I've covered through the years in them. You know, there's the Amanda Tussin case over in Jonesboro. You know, a college student disappeared in 2000. 18 years later, the file is still, you know, I talked to the lead detective on it several months ago. He said, oh yeah, I've been doing interviews and doing this. And I'm sure he is. I'm sure, and I know the guy, so I know he's doing real work. But a lot of these cases, they're not. They're just, they don't want somebody else coming in and solving a case that they couldn't solve. And that's all it is. It's ego. And it needs to change. I mean, if 14, 15 years, I mean, you know, and I'm sure Larry's going to live to be 1,000 years old to knowing him, but I mean, I'm sure he wants this solved tomorrow. I mean, what if it gets solved, you know, after he's gone? I mean, that's just not right.
Yeah.
What do you want our viewers to know? Do you want information? Do you want somebody to come forward? Do you want somebody to?
I think there's 2 things in particular. One is that as of a couple of years ago, an individual that you'll hear about in the near future began to become involved with Rebecca's case, and it's a lady. Her name is Catherine Townsend. She's a licensed private investigator, but she's also with some of the TV channels. Discovery.
She's a journalist.
Okay.
Yeah.
Journalist.
Okay.
Yeah, she's a journalist with a private investigator's license.
So she has a unique interest in Rebecca's case, and the reason she does is she grew up or her family grew up in the Melbourne Mountain View area.
Okay.
Her sister, Carolyn, went to school with my daughter.
With Rebecca?
With Danielle.
Okay.
And Danielle is the baby of that group of girls that I had. I have two litters is what I say. I have my older litter and my younger litter is right over here, sitting. The personal interest that Catherine took was enhanced a little bit, I think, because her father is a deputy sheriff as well. But I think you're going to have her on your show at some point, and she'll be happy to go into things. But the beauty of what took place is she began to look at this from the perspective of, I know nothing, let me start from the beginning.
Okay.
Yeah, she lives in New York and in LA, so she's not here.
So she wasn't contaminated with rumors, and I could say in a sense I was contaminated because of all the things that would come into my office. I mean, you have no idea the things that came in. But she looked at it as though a basic investigator starting from scratch, what do I need to look at?
And she's been working on this how long?
She's been a couple of years, in a sense, I think.
In a sense, she really started, she emailed me, I think, in February, and that's when her and I started communicating seriously, like she really wanted to do the podcast. I believe she had written about maybe this case a couple of years ago, and then kind of had other projects going on, and then she came back to it this year, and she's really put together.
Yeah.
She's
the one that's doing the podcast.
Yeah, let's talk about that a little bit. Is it something on her channel, or she does on a regular basis?
I think the podcast start October the 17th. There will be a trailer for the podcast that is coming out October the 10th, and we will have flyers and we'll have all of the information, how to get on the podcast. We'll have all that details shortly, within another day or two. So she's working on all that now.
I think the Discovery Channel is going to push it on their platforms.
Yeah.
Okay.
And
so,
and it's going to be free. You can download it. And,
website that you can go to. So I know we have a lot of people calling my office on it too. So we'll get all that information out. But there's 8 podcasts, is my understanding.
Okay.
And she has done a thorough. She's interviewed everybody.
Yeah.
And she. There's definitely some obfuscation going on here in this case. I mean, there's no doubt.
The most important statement that I can make right now, other than turning to the viewers and asking a question would be that she's brought so much attention to the case now. And it has also brought people out. She's been broadcasting on the radio down in the Batesville area and around. But other people have come out now. Mm-hmm. So we have a complete turnaround to the case. There's a lot of people sharing information. Mm-hmm. Plus, you have to understand that Rebecca was 22 years of age when she was murdered. The group that she was involved with would have been in that same age group. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So a lot of those people are older now. They have families. Those that have a conscience that knew things may now feel like they would like to come out and share. And that's what I want to do, is I want people to understand that we still need information. We know who did it. Okay? I mean, and I couldn't say this a few years ago, but we know who did it. And what we need now is the cooperation of testimony from people that have overheard a confession, mm-hmm. A statement where this individual is telling people how they did it or whatever. I don't want to get into too much right now, sure, but yeah. If there's people out there that know something, and they'll know what I'm talking about, that were around that time period, we need you to come. We need your help. Yeah. You know, please help us solve this.
Yeah, sure.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Okay.
Mm. Well, we do reach out to the Melbourne area and Calico Rock and all that area. So if you're watching this, you want them to contact you directly? Is there contact information?
I think Catherine Townsend's going to have a number on here that you're going to provide. They can contact my office, Dr. Larry Gould in Mountain Home.
Okay.
And
George has probably been. There's contact.
I've been contacted by a bunch of people.
Yeah.
Okay.
Just on Facebook.
Yeah, there are all kinds of ways. And anything you give us, anything you tell us, we will keep confidential to start with until we have your permission. But we will also take it to law enforcement if it's appropriate. I don't want to circumvent law enforcement. I'm just saying I found out that a lot of the things I forwarded never were researched, never got looked into. And that's the part that hurts me the most. And that's the part that I can't understand why there wasn't a little bit more detail put into some of the peripheral information that was passed on. Let's put it that way.
Well, we want people to do the right thing.
Absolutely.
And if you have any information, we want that information to be relayed so that this can be solved. As simple as that. If you can't reach the numbers on the screen, you can call us directly here at the station, and we'll pass that information directly on to you guys. Mm-hmm.
And I would have a challenge. Are we still on?
Yep. You still.
I would have a challenge, and that challenge would be that if you worked at Sonic, the Sonic restaurant in Melbourne, during that time period, which would be September of 2004, and you have any information you can provide us about employees there, whether they were there working or not, please come forward and let us know. Privately let us know. Okay?
Thank you all so much for being here. This is a very interesting topic, and it would be very nice to hear a good follow-up and a conclusion to this whole thing.
Well, the podcast, I think, will be done in a way that people will really have an interest in following it, because you'll learn lots of details in it.
We get that information. We'll pass it along to our viewers, and we'll let as many people as want to be involved in this podcast and find more information, find new information, stuff that really will bring this to a close.
And George has promised me he'd write a book on Rebecca, so that in itself is, I'm going to hold him to it.
All right.
All I'm going to do is just collect up all the chapters from all the other books and put them together in a compilation, so I've already done it.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you for having us on.
Appreciate it very much.
Deeply appreciate it very much.
And we want to thank everyone for tuning into the show today, and thank you so much for showing up for the show.
Thank you for being here with me, Dan.
And you were late for rehearsal, but anyway. If you'd like to be a part of what we do here, you can contact us here at 1226 Commerce Drive here in Mountain Home, Arkansas. And you give us a call at 870-424-6957. We're on Facebook at Hometown Television. or you can go to our webpage at hometowntv.net. Thanks for watching. We'll see you again next time.